Money. Everyone wants it. Until now, Monty Brewster didn't have it.
They tell me you're my only living relative.
But he just made money the old-fashioned way.
You have 30 days in which to spend $30 million.
He inherited it.
If you can do it, you get 300. But if you fail, don't get diddly.
Why can't I tell my friends?
Because I don't want anybody to help me out.
Hey guys, welcome to Movie Matters. I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And today we're talking about the Walter Hill film, Brewster's Millions. Back on that baseball grind still. I've never seen this movie. Jake, you've never seen it, right?
Nope.
What'd you think of it? I'm curious.
I thought it's entertaining. There weren't any like laugh out loud funny moments for me.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't know if I'd ever watch it again, but like it was fine. Like, I would expect a bit more from the cast, in this. But I mean, it was fine.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big John Candy fan, and I've said it before, and I'll say it all the time. I mean, I grew up with him. He was like America's dad, and I've seen most of his movies, but I hadn't seen this one. Obviously I've seen his famous ones, and I've never really watched anything from Richard Pryor before, and he's, a pretty famous comedian. I liked it. Like I said, it's my first time seeing this. I wasn't in love with it, but I didn't hate it. I think this movie also, like some of our other films that we've watched, this movie is of its time, very specific to its time. I feel like when this came out in 85, I feel like this movie was hilarious to people in 85.
Yeah. I would agree. I think the comedy landscape, I think, has just like moved into a more, like, I don't know if it's sophisticated like direction, like in like the current era. Like that's not really the right word. But like there's a little bit, like, I feel like they've figured out how to make jokes land better now, and they've like figured out like editing with comedy a lot better, and stuff like that. Like there were a lot of parts in this movie where I couldn't understand what anyone was saying because so many people were talking at the same time. And like I feel like that's just like a movie making technique that's like been fixed for like a lot of like modern movies, where like they figured out how to like edit like individual audio tracks like independently and like balance everything correctly so that you can still hear important dialogue over like background noise. So like I feel like this movie maybe would benefit from some like modern kind of advances in what you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying. 100%. I mean, it's interesting going back to comedy in like the 30s and 40s, how quick and like, they don't let anything breathe. And it's just like, let me get out this comedic line and then this comedic line and then this comedic line. And it's, I feel like it's gradually gotten more like, hey, let's let the room breathe and let this comedic moment live a little bit longer. And comedy has definitely evolved significantly. Obviously, I mean, as most things do in life, it has evolved so much, especially in film. And I get what you're saying. Like this movie is still, again, it's of its time, like I was saying, and it's very 80s comedy where it's like, I don't know. It's so different than today's comedy, even though today's comedy is kind of dying, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Just because everyone has to be, on their toes with every little joke, which is disappointing. But yeah, I get what you're trying to say 100%, and I hope our audiences do too.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will.
Like,
But
I think you can even see the difference in what I'm talking about in like stand up between like the late 70s and 80s versus now. So if anybody doesn't know, Richard Pryor was probably like the number one stand-up comedian in the 80s. Like, he was unbelievably famous, probably also up there with I think like Bill Hicks probably would have been big at this time as well, and like a few others, like
Eddie Murphy,
Carlin
probably.
and Eddie Murphy for sure. Yeah. But like Richard Pryor was in a lot of movies in the 80s. I'm sure we'll do more with him. Him and Gene Wilder did like 5 movies together in like the span of the 80s. So like, I think Mel Brooks directed a few of them. But yeah, so like he was a big star. But like if you watch stand up from that time, it's very, like you said, Kevin, fast paced, and like there's not a whole lot of time to let the audience kind of laugh and like digest things. Where like now it's like incredibly important in stand up to let the audience like fully take in each joke and then like keep feeding them, in like a more regulated way. And like I feel like a lot of that is like, I don't know if this will come up in trivia or not, but this movie seems like it was just like a coke fueled like fever dream. And Richard Pryor is notorious for being like a massive coke fiend. So like you can tell, like, even if he wasn't high during the making of the movie, just like a lot of his like acting is very like urgent and like
manic, a little bit almost.
Manic, yeah. Like John Candy too, had a lot of similar like problems, I think specifically with like uppers like coke and stuff like that. So
I shouldn't be laughing.
No, but I mean, like, that was the time. That was what a lot of the comedians and other like stars were doing at that time. I mean, this was 85, I think, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's like this isn't the only movie I think that kind of shows that in like the acting, especially like right in the middle of the 80s when like a lot of that like drug abuse was like at its peak. So, but I don't want to like blame cocaine for the like the entire like shortcoming of the movie, but like I feel like that probably played a part. It's like if you're in a writer's room and everyone's like out of their minds, like these jokes would probably be hilarious. But,
I mean, maybe it's kind of similar to our Police Academy review where it's like the comedy just didn't land with us in this day and age. I mean, again, these movies are almost 40, if not more than 40 years old. This one is obviously just almost 40 years old. So, I mean, a lot's changed in that time. And, I mean, it's the movie's a little over the top, but I feel like that helps lend to the comedy and it helps lend to the premise of like, which the premise is great of, you have to spend $30 million in 30 days, which in my opinion, in the 80s, in general, that's a lot of money, but in the 80s, that's a lot of money.
That would be hard in the 80s. That would be hard today. Yeah. Like, even, especially with the rules that are put in place for him, like, even today, spending $30 million, like, spending $1 million a day without acquiring an asset is difficult.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about it. I'm like, I would just probably buy a shit ton of cars, but those are kind of assets. Like, they still hold a value. Yeah. So, yeah. Interesting.
You'd have to dump it all into, like, rent or, like, other things that like you could never recover. Like it's like the hotel, like renting out the entire like top like 2 or 3 floors of the Plaza Hotel is like a good move.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you think? I mean, so this movie has had like 7 or 8 iterations in film. I don't know if you know that, but it's
So
been.
I saw there's one from the 40s that seems to be like
Dude, there's so many.
the most prominent, like other version of it.
Let's see.
But I could see this premise is like I guess it's kind of relatable, because like I mean the whole point is that his great uncle wants him to appreciate the money that he's going to be inheriting. So he forces him to spend this $30 million in order to get $300 million,
Which is also insane.
which is also a lot of money. But like it's like like by the end of the movie, like I guess like the best way to explain it is like throughout everything, like you're on his side because you want him to win, or get the money, you know. But like he does start to come across as kind of an elitist asshole in the way that he's just flaunting the money around, and his accountant, Miss Duke, right? I think
I'm always
she's
horrible
like
with names.
Yeah, I know, me too.
Drake, Angela Drake.
She gets pissed at him because she's like, hey, like you're just like pissing all this away. Like you should be doing something like that matters with it. And like you know, it is hard as the viewer, I think, to be like to watch it happen as well. Because you know that he's got to lie to like all these people on why he's just blowing this money in ridiculous ways, you know?
Yeah.
But in the end, like that's the point, is for him to be like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm sick of it. And then, you know, actually appreciate what he's going to inherit.
Yeah. I mean, how do you not spend money when you have $300 million still and get nice things? I don't know. But I get the lesson. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this movie, or this is based on a novel. It came out in 1902, so a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
And this is the 7th iteration of this in film form.
Wow.
Brewster's Millions. In earlier iterations, they only had to spend $1 million, which I get in like the 30s and stuff. That's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love the premise. I think it could be remade today. I think it would be good if it got remade today, and it would be an interesting. I don't know. I feel like there'd be an interesting way to do it, especially in today's day and age. And I love how, again, like you're saying, it's, you know, it makes him look like an elitist snob asshole, and then he gets into the political landscape, which is even better, and that made like
talk about a sinkhole for money. Like that would have been the best place to spend all of it.
Yeah. And it's you know, I said this movie's kind of its time from the 80s, but like it's very relevant in the political sense today, in my opinion, of like vote none of the above, and just how politics have become so crazy in my opinion. I'm not very political, and I don't want to get political on this podcast at all, but it definitely is like timeless in that regard of politics, of just how it's stupid and how it's just like it's a popularity contest almost, and that's how he almost ends up winning, but has to drop out, which is hilarious in and of itself. But I loved that aspect of the movie. A lot.
the message that like the one guy who calls bullshit on everything is the one that ends up being the one that gets, almost elected.
Yeah.
And then he's got to quit because he's like, I don't even want to do this. It's like I was just like trying, making a joke basically.
Yeah.
But like I even like the commentary on money in politics, I think is still incredibly relevant. And like, I don't know what campaigns were spending in the 80s, but it was probably like $1 million for like the presidency, where like now it's like $1 billion. Like it's like insane. Like so
hundreds of thousands for sure, or if not millions or billions. Yeah, it's crazy. That was probably my favorite aspect of the movie. Now, getting into the baseball side of it, would you consider it a baseball movie?
I guess so, because the main like climax of the movie is the game with the Yankees, I think. And that's kind of when I think he has his like epiphany that like where he's kind of like fed up with everything. Like he kind of thought that like doing all this stuff would like get him to be like a major league pitcher, and like he realized that like all the money in the world isn't going to like buy him a spot on a professional baseball team. And I think that's kind of when he has his like moment of realization that like the money doesn't really matter as much as he thought it did,
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, and I agree 100% with that. I do like, when they play baseball in the beginning and then that climax, it is entertaining. It is a baseball movie, but I'd say, I don't know. It's only like a third of it, not even.
It's a borderline baseball movie.
Yeah. So, but I'm glad we did it because we both haven't seen it, and I like that you haven't seen the other upcoming movies and The Natural we did last week. Because I hadn't seen this movie, and my friend had recommended it. I love that Richard Pryor wears a Cubs jersey.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, we've talked about it. We're both from Chicago. Richard Pryor's originally from Illinois. I was briefly reading that like he had a pretty tough life. This is horrible, but I read that he was like molested by his neighbor and a preacher. Like that's pretty messed up. I mean, really messed up. But like, I won't get into that. but yeah, like I just briefly read it in his biography on IMDb and was like, oh wow, like that's pretty rough. This is the only movie I've seen by him. We definitely should see his other movies. I know he's done some in the 70s and the 80s, like you were saying. We'll have to add some more to the list. I didn't think he was that good of an actor in this. He had the same inflection the entire time, in my opinion. But, I mean, a lot of comedians aren't amazing actors, to be honest.
I think that's kind of his, like, thing, too. Like, that kind of, like, tone and that kind of, like, manic kind of...
It's a shtick, for sure.
I think that's just, like, his, like, comedy style. So, like, I could see, but like, I agree. It is like hard. It's really hard to find a good stand-up comedian that can also act pretty well. Because like the like being great at stand-up, I don't think always translates into acting very well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like looking at Jerry Seinfeld, like he's a big stand-up comedian. I don't think he's a good actor. I mean, he's literally like in Seinfeld, he's literally laughing at everything.
Yeah.
But like, we still love him. Like I like Richard Pryor a lot just from this movie, but like, I don't think he's good at acting.
Yeah, and I think like Seinfeld's a good example where he has like 3 really strong actors around him that are like excellent and kind of help keep him
like grounded.
grounded. Yeah, through the the acting portion of things. And I think kind of helped pick up the slack a little bit when, like, you know, his, like, deliveries are a little bit more stand-up-ish, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the others kind of get a little bit more, like, animated and, like, you know, give you a little bit more, I think, than just the, like, line delivery, you know, that I think stand-up comedians are, like, more used to.
Agreed. What do you think of, like, the supporting cast in this movie in that kind of regard of what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I mean, like, John Candy is excellent.
Yeah, he's really good in it.
Like, he's... I don't know if he did stand up. I think he was a Second City guy primarily, right?
He was on SCTV, which was the Canadian version of, like...
SNL and...
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because, like, he's... You can tell his like skill set is, I think, more in improv than stand up, and like that's I think lends much more to like film acting.
Yes, agreed.
And like he's just kind of like, I think, a natural kind of like camera presence, like, so he helps a lot, I think. It's kind of unfortunate that they don't have that many scenes together.
I know,
in the movie, which is interesting. And like, I feel like that could have helped out a lot if Candy was in it more. But there's a lot of like notable actors in this, like especially like 80s people.
Yes,
are in this. Like Rick Moranis, I think, pops up.
Yeah.
Who's like the repeater guy who just repeats everything.
That was so random.
Yeah.
But funny.
Yeah, and then like the not the two lawyers, but the other guy that's like the estate like manager or whatever.
The guy who takes the 20,000 and holds it? Is that one?
No. But he's also like an 80s.
Yeah.
Big 80s
Are you
actor.
talking like Edward Roundfield? He's pretty big. But yeah, I mean, like, even in the beginning, I was like, holy shit, I paused it like 4 times because, like, this is an 80s actor that we know. This is an 80s actor that we know. This is an 80s actor that we know. Like, the coach is the dad from Dirty Dancing, which we just did.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who's up to bat, the black guy that he's Agent Johnson in Die Hard. He's in Lethal Weapon. I mean, he's in all the 80s movies, and he's just got a minor role. He was in License to Kill that we just watched.
Right, yeah.
Like, that guy is in everything. What other ones did I find that I was like, oh, yeah.
The one announcer in the Yankee game is Poppy.
Yep.
From Seinfeld.
Yeah. Yep. And he was in Cobra, which is another one we did.
Yeah, right.
There was, I mean, the guy who's the photographer who takes the pictures for Richard Pryor's character. He was in Naked Gun, which we did. He's the guy who, when Leslie Nielsen's giving him the $20 bill to like try and interrogate him, he's that guy,
nice.
Which is great. So there's a handful of other ones that I noticed. I thought I wrote it down, but yeah, Grandel Bush is the name of the guy who plays Agent Johnson. He's the batter in there. Yeah, I mean, I just was like, oh yeah, that I love that. It's I don't know, it makes me like tie all these movies together when I see familiar faces because, you know, I mean, you do that kind of, you don't really even do that now. I feel like there's not like, oh, I've seen that guy in this movie and he's everywhere, but he's not super prominent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not as common as it was in, I guess, for the movies we're watching. Maybe it's just because we're just getting into them even more so than we already have been, you know?
Like, this kind of reminds me of, like, all the, like, SNL, like, movies that were made in, like, the 90s and early 2000s where, like, all of the cast members do, like, little bit parts, you know, in, like, each other's movies and stuff. Or, like, Rob Schneider in, like, every Adam Sandler movie, you know, and, like, it's always, like, them and, like, their buddies just kind of, like, hanging out and, like, doing stuff. Or, like, Norm McDonald and Billy Madison, is just like a drunk for like no reason, like that kind of stuff is kind of like what this movie reminds me of, where like it's just like these guys like getting all their buddies together, like make a movie,
Yeah, and then it makes you like want to have a good time. You kind of relate a little bit, which is fun. Yeah, so Walter Hill directed this. I mentioned that in the beginning. He also did 48 Hours with Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy, which is an 80s movie. And he also did Red Heat with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Belushi, Jim Belushi. Have you seen those movies?
No.
Oh, okay. I watched 48 Hours, relatively recent. I maybe have to watch it again, but there's like, again, the who's who of 80s actors in that movie too. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I really liked it. And I know people are going to hate me for it because it's a classic. But yeah. It was, I'll have to give it another shot. But I think it's one of those of the time movies. Red Heat, I haven't watched in a long, long time. Again, being a huge Arnold Schwarzenegger fan, I watched that in my childhood, and I think it's something I'll have to watch again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Walter Hill is known for these, 48 Hours and Red Heat. He's known for these action movies. He wanted to do something lighter fare in his career, and this was the deviation from that. And basically, he's like, I want to do something fun and lighthearted. And he's like, I also want a surefire hit so I can do other movies. And this movie was a decent hit, and he had never done a straight up comedy and wanted to do it. Because let's see, he's done. I'm pulling up his resume here. He's produced a lot of movies, but Red Heat. He did another 48 Hours, which is the sequel, which I never saw. He did Brewster's Millions. He did The Warriors, which is probably his claim to fame. Mm-hmm. He did The Driver, which is kind of like the movie Drive, but I've never seen it. Yeah, he hasn't done a ton of movies, but he's done a decent amount. Yeah, I mean, he's still alive today and directing movies, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he's still alive. But, I don't know. It's interesting to see an action director go to a comedy. I mean, he did dance around with comedy a little bit, obviously in 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy, and that kind of gave him the confidence to do this movie. And there's apparently a lot of like nods to his movie 48 Hours in this movie. Like there's, for example, like the bookie that Richard Pryor lays all the bets down with, like all these terrible bets. He's wearing, that bookie is wearing the same suit that Eddie Murphy wears in 48 Hours, which is cool. I think probably one of the, I know you said there's not a ton of laugh out loud moments. The one moment I probably laughed out loud that I liked the best was with the stamp. I enjoyed that bit a little bit. It's like, go invest in a stamp. It's like, all right, well, let me go buy the most expensive stamp. And then, you've got the accountants reading a letter. Oh, we got a letter. And then, because they saw in the newspaper that he bought a stamp, and they're reading this letter, and then all of a sudden they see the stamp on the letter, and they're like, oh, shit. I loved that. I thought that was really funny.
But especially because they think they got him, because they're like, oh, that's a significant asset. Then they flip the postcard over, and they're like,
yeah. It's a great bit. It's really clever. I mean, it's... I think another funny line I laughed out loud on was when John Candy he's the catcher, and they're playing the Yankees, and he's like talking to the Yankees player and like telling him what a big fan he is, and then he just tries to like get him to strike out, and he's just like, yeah, I saw your wife on TV. She's one ugly bitch. I laughed pretty hard at that. That was really good delivery.
That was pretty good too.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about the ending and how the guy holds the $20,000 and then they just get it in just in time with the receipt for having Miss Drake be the lawyer on retainer, which I think is funny.
Yeah, I think it's it's like the classic last minute triumph, kind of thing. I thought it was good. You know, like none of the like villains in this movie are like particularly like
Villainous.
intelligent or even like that like they're more like dastardly, you know, kind of villains than like maniacal or something. But like
Yeah.
they're just kind of like sleazy scumbags. And like I do like that they kind of invert what's the boyfriend's name or the fiance's name? Warren.
Yeah, Warren.
Yeah, because like she's like, I don't think anyone could buy off Warren, and he's like instantly bought off when he meets Brewster, which is pretty funny. And then like obviously he's the one that like blows the lid on the whole thing and like gets them to or helps Pryor succeed in the end by telling Angela, you know, what the plan was. Because again, he's kind of an idiot and like,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought it was a good ending. It's like a nice tie up. He gets his money, like, and learns a lesson. Everything's, you know, nicely packaged.
Yeah, and he makes his friends rich in the process, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, like John Candy, like gets super rich.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be pretty cool if your friend had that, you know, will clause and then made you rich in the process, and then you find out later that he's literally just trying to spend money, and you're just like, oh, that's cool. I don't know. Yeah, I liked how it tied up. But again, it's kind of that 80s ending where it just like ends, where it's just like,
yeah,
I
would have liked to see a little bit of like what he does with the 300 million, you know,
Yeah.
like that would have been, I think, a nicer like tie up if it was like him and John Candy really did buy a Corvette and drive to the Rocky Mountains to like fish and hang out, you know, and then like he gave a bunch of it to charity or something. Like, you know, that would be like a nice ending.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Or whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, it was fine. And like, I do feel like it's one of those runtime things where they're like, just package it, cut, you know, get it done. Like, and then, you know, we're all good at, you know, an hour and 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to that, I mean, this movie was an hour and 42 minutes, which is a little long for a comedy in the 80s, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it ran a little too long for me. Like,
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I was invested pretty much the whole time. Like, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, like I think it was paced really well. For a premise that could drag out like really badly, you know, of just like a giant montage of him spending money, basically. Like they did pace it pretty well, and I think the like obstacles that are thrown at him are like actually pretty engaging, you know. So like, yeah, I think it was pretty well done, which I think like that's why like I can forgive it for not being like incredibly like laugh out loud funny. Like it was still at least entertaining.
Yeah.
To watch and like see him like navigate the problems that arise, you know, from the premise. So yeah, I mean, it's like I'd watch it once, like maybe again, but like this isn't like a, you know, annual watch or anything like that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so next week we have Major League coming up, which just came out in 4K Blu-ray. I've kind of talked about it before as well. I'm a big proponent of physical media. I just bought it. I literally got it in the mail yesterday.
Yeah, I'll probably get it too.
Nice. Yeah, I'm super excited to watch it. I bought that in Running Man in 4K.
Ooh. I've never seen Running Man, but I've heard it's unbelievably good. So
yeah, we got to do that one soon.
Yeah, we should do that one too.
Yeah, we'll do that next month, hopefully. Yeah, so yeah, stick around for some more baseball movies, and Major League is next, and we're looking forward to the next one.
Yep. See you next week.